friends, my name is Marines, and today my best friend is picking a book for me to read. I'm spending 2 weeks here visiting Nicole in Kansas City, and as we were planning this trip, she had mentioned having this idea, wanting to do this collaboration where we both go to the library together and we pick a book, but for each other. So that's what we're doing here today.
I think that we need to separate a little bit, and in order to make sure that we're not running into each other as we do this, I've decided that I need to hit up the nonfiction section. I don't do a ton of library nonfiction, mostly because I just love highlighting and leaving tabs and all of that kind of thing. So I feel a little bit out of my depth, to be honest. We did this book for Nonfiction Book Club a while ago. I'm not gonna pick it, I think, because it's kind of intense, but would highly recommend. This was another nonfiction book club pick that I would recommend, but I feel like this isn't the vibe for right now. I don't know, dense science is not necessarily the thing that I want her to be reading while she's on vacation in my house. Okay, so I had a specific book that I was looking for, but I could not find it, and that is because all copies are in use. So I need to come up with a new plan. My second choice book is available, but it's at my usual library and not this one. I was like, okay, what if I just move on to fiction? And my first choice fiction book, also all copies in use. I'm really struggling today. Yet another book is only available at my regular library. Go to the downtown library, I said. It'll be fun, I said. I found a book, and it's a book that I think she would actually enjoy because it's very narrative nonfiction. It's pretty heavy. It's called All That She Carried, The Journey of Ashley Stack, A Black Family's Keepsake. And it's basically charting a family lineage through a singular object. I can't tell if it makes the most sense to just pick this book in the interest of picking a book, or if we should just go to a different library. I do think that you'll have things to say about this book. So let's go. I'll pass you the microphone when I pass you the book.
All That She Carried by Tia Miles. I've never heard of this book.
Perfect. The fact that I picked a book that you'd never heard of, I actually feel like, it's a win.
This is a win. That is actually a win. I'm I could not tell you anything about this book or about why you picked it. It's going to be the exact opposite of what I just handed you. I finished reading All That She Carried by Tia Miles. This is an account of a single item that has been traced down multiple generations. So the story starts with an enslaved woman named Rose who, facing the imminent sale of her daughter, packs a cotton bag with a few essentials needed for her survival. And that cotton bag is what is passed through generations of this family until it reaches the great-granddaughter, who embroiders some part of this history onto the bag itself. I will start by saying that I understand why Nicole picked this for me, and more, I understand why she appreciated the story. It is not a book that I have heard of or one that I would have guessed she would have picked for me, but also we were working with what was available at the library. So in nonfiction in general, I personally lean towards things that have more of a narrative arc. And I think that this, for the purpose of like recommending to people, it's important to note that I do think that this leans more like history focused. You can tell that it is written by a historian, but it still does have that strong sort of narrative arc. The thing I think that impressed me most of all about like the actual book, the construction and the craft, is the way that Miles takes like the items in this cotton bag and she uses that as an opportunity to paint a picture of like the institution of slavery and also like very specific time periods. So it's things like there's a worn dress in the bag, and she takes us through some of thinking through textiles and what the kind of clothing that enslaved people in this time period would have worn and what those things mean. So it was those jumping off points that I just felt really, really satisfied with. It really got me thinking in multiple directions. I really appreciated the way that as a historian, she organized the information that she was sharing with us. There were portions where like we can't know what Ruth, for instance, like what she did or who exactly she was because of the incomplete records of the time, and because the records that do exist are from the perspective of like the enslavers. And so that offers its own kind of lens and bias, but she was able to say, okay, here's what we know about Black women of the time and how they were treated and what their lives looked like and how we can sort of extrapolate from there. And all of that, again, was well organized, well argued, and just very, very thought-provoking. Reading this really made me think a lot about how important it is to contend with history. And I know that's like a very basic thought, but specifically I was reading about like the accounts of slavery in here, and it was all stuff that I knew or that I had heard before, but that it is easy to sort of gloss over or relegate to a sort of like slavery bad place, but that like sitting with it and actually understanding, for instance, how clothing worked within the institution of slavery. And this talked a lot about like the sexual violence that Black women specifically endured. And again, things that you know and you have heard of, but it is different, I think, to like let it be present, especially for, let's say, like me in the state of Florida, and maybe all of us as we live through the reality of the next 4 years under a Trump presidency, to like hear these things about book banning or about wanting to change how we educate people about slavery, right? The kinds of narratives that we're seeing pop up in Florida about how slavery was good for these people. And that kind of erasure of history and rewriting of history is just more violence. And it is easy to know that on a sort of removed philosophical level, and another thing to be like vividly and viscerally reminded of why this is the kind of history that people don't want you to sit with and contend with and think about how we continue to repair. If you have watched any of the like vlogs or videos that I have been making during this time, I think I've now mentioned a couple of times about some of the things Nicole and I have been talking about while I've been here. We're big yappers, if you can't tell that about us individually. And so I've mentioned in some of my most recent videos that we've been talking a lot post-election about sort of survival and surviving and the kinds of things that human can adapt to. I think that right after the election, it felt very much like the 2020 era, especially like early in the pandemic when we were sort of contending with the ways that our lives were fundamentally changing and the realities of being alone and quarantined and all of those things. And so that was fresh in our mind after the election, and we're like staring down the barrel of another 4 years that could be catastrophic as well. And it's interesting to me the way that it works out sometimes, that either by chance, like some of your like reading or media lines up so that it feels like it's all in conversation with each other, or it's just like this is the thing that is at the forefront of our minds, and so we're drawing a lot of these connections. So it is really interesting the way that all that she carried is in kind of conversation with this idea of surviving, which is a big theme in The Past is Red as well. The idea of like contending with history and understanding the legacies that it has provided, and like where you go from there, how you treat that history, how you communicate that history. That is a main theme here, and it is one in The Past is Red as well. Two very different genres, two very different approaches to that thematic content, but certainly very present in both of these. I will also say that this was just a profoundly moving story for me in a lot of ways as I think about the women in my family, and I think about the narratives that were passed down via generations, and I also think about the way that the experiences of the women in my family before me shaped who they were as people and how that influences me as a person, what I value, what I carry, I guess for better or for worse, the way that so much of what I am is a reaction to these women and their survival and their perseverance. I very much appreciate not only the information here and the way that it was organized and communicated, but the way that it affected me emotionally. I want to read you some of the opening lines of the introduction. We forget that love is revolutionary. The word, cute and overused in American culture, can feel at times like a stuffed animal devoid of spirit, or worse, like a dead letter suitable only for easy exchange on social media platforms. But love does carry profound meanings. It indicates the radical realignment of social life. To love is to turn away from the prioritization of the ego or even one's particular party or tribe, to give of oneself for another, to transfigure the narrow I into the expansive you or we. This four-letter word asks of us, then, one of the most difficult tasks in life, decentering the self for the good of another. This is a task for which we need exemplars, especially in our divisive times. Here in these pages, we take up a quiet story of transformative love lived and told by ordinary African-American women, Rose, Ashley, and Ruth, whose lives span the 19th and 20th centuries, slavery and freedom, the North and the South. Their love story is one of sacrifice, suffering, lament, and the rescue of a tested but resilient family lineage. So thank you to Nicole for putting that on my radar. Again, I had never heard of it, probably would have never picked it up without her recommendation. Be sure to head on over to her video where you can see me pick out The Past is Red for her and her thoughts on that work. That's it for me today. If you have read or would like to read All That She Carried by Tia Miles, let me know down in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys soon.
So pretty, like Belle. Hide my gingerbread socks.
No, they're so cute. Got gingerbread socks, a Christmas tree in the background. Oh my gosh, look
so
at us.
pretty.
We're so festive. Waitress talked about how cute we are.
That is true. We did get compliments. Thinking about my next move.
What's your mind,
I know, I'm thinking about my next move. Because you had this story, huh? We're so good at this.
Ignore all previous clips. Start here. Okay? Okay.